Hi, fans of high-quality entertainment. Today is another tier list. And this time, I've just picked 40 music-related artists, mainly, rock music-related artists. There are a handful of pop artists in this mix. And I just thought it would be fun for me to rank them in this tier list. So as always, there's S tier, which is superior, and then A, B, C, D, and yes. In this tier list, there is E, the worst. So these are the 40 artists in no particular order. I'll see if I can say all of their names because this is going to go by pretty fast. So first up, and like I said, it's not in any order, but the artists include Jimi Hendrix, Billy Joel, Roger Waters, Taylor Swift, Elvis Presley, Bruce Springsteen, Mike Love, Mickey Dolenz, John Lennon, Kate Bush, Jimmy Page, Ron Mayle, Brian Wilson, Elton John, Justin Bieber, Chuck Berry, Frank Zappa, David Gilmour. I got to go back a bit. It's going by too fast. David Gilmour, Freddie Mercury, Little Richard, Johnny Cash, Janis Joplin, Joni Mitchell, Jerry Lee Lewis, John Fogerty, Kid Rock, Lou Reed, Madonna, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Yoko Ono, Paul Simon, Pete Townsend, Phil Collins, Randy Newman, Robert Plant, Rod Stewart, David Bowie, Sly Stone, Bono. It was so easy. So with this tier list, what I'm ranking these artists on is just their talent. Even if I'm not a big fan of the artist, I'm going to be honest and consider, the talent that they have. So, for instance, I know, Justin Bieber. I know a lot of you would think I would just easily put him in E. But even though I'm not a fan of his music at all, I think he does have talent for what he does. He can play the drums very well. He sings, he dances. I'll put him in B because, like I said, he's a talented person, but I don't like his music. Bruce Springsteen is A. I don't love everything he's done, but I am a big fan of a lot of his early albums. Like I think my favorite is Tunnel of Love, and then of course Born to Run and The River and all kinds of other albums. Mickey Dolenz. I think overall he's in B. Very talented, He's more talented than Justin Bieber. I love his vocals and, yeah. John Lennon is S tier. Now, Jimmy Page, I know a lot of you would probably put him in S tier. But the thing is, since Led Zeppelin ended, I know he did, a couple of things. He was in the Firm band, which I never really got into, and he did a few little other things, but he certainly didn't have a solo career like Robert Plant has had, which I think is kind of, I don't know, as the years go by, like he just didn't do too much after Led Zeppelin, so I'm going to put him in A, but ahead of Bruce Springsteen. But for the Led Zeppelin years, of course, he would be S tier. Ron Mayle of Sparks. He's an S tier for me. One of my all-time favorite songwriters, great keyboardist, and humorous guy with his, facial expressions and everything. Elton John. For his 70s, it would be definitely S tier, but I mean, for his whole career, because he did put out some pretty weak albums later on, but I'll put him still in A, ahead of Bruce Springsteen. Little Richard. He's got to be S tier. Now, I don't, you know, talent wise, yeah, S tier, but you know what, really? Yeah, Little Richard has to be S tier, but because this is my own personal ranking at the same time, I still want to put John and Ron ahead of him. Chuck Berry, certainly don't like him as a person, but he's got to be S tier for being one of the pioneers of rock and roll. I'll put him ahead of Little Richard. Janis Joplin. Just, for me personally, I was never a big fan of her voice or anything. Not that I dislike it, but she definitely had talent. I'll put her in B, but not before Mickey Dolenz. Joni Mitchell, once again, I do like her music. I'm not a huge fan or anything, but she has to be S tier and ahead of Little Richard. But not Ron Mayall. Jerry Lee Lewis, another great rock and roll pioneer. Between Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis, they're pretty equal for their music. I'm going to put Little Richard ahead, though. Lots of S tiers already. Brian Wilson. Overall, he's got, I haven't heard all of his solo albums. I know he supposedly has some weak ones, but I mean, for what he's done, he's got to go ahead of Ron Mayall. I know Sparks are big fans of the Beach Boys. No, there's no way. Pretty close, though. Kid Rock goes to E. Let's move on. Lou Reed. There's going to be a lot in S tier. I love almost everything he's done with, Velvet Underground and his solo career. Where would I put him for talent? Even though like I said, I love his music more than Joni Mitchell's, I still think Joni Mitchell is so talented. And the only reason I have Chuck Berry ahead of Joni Mitchell is because of, being such a huge influence on rock music. Paul McCartney is S tier and he's ahead of John Lennon. But that is partially, of course, sadly, because we lost John Lennon in 1980. He didn't have the long career that Paul McCartney had. George Harrison, I will put an A. I know a lot of you Beatles fans or George Harrison fans would have him an S. I'm just not as big of a fan of some of his solo career. But I will put him ahead of Jimmy Page. Yeah. Because he was in the Beatles. And yes, there are, somebody's going to say, where's Ringo Starr or where's Barry Manilow? They're not in the list. These are just random artists that I've chosen. Paul Simon, he's S tier, one of the greatest songwriters. He would be, he'd be ahead of Ron Mayle for talent. I hate to say that. But Brian Wilson would be before him. Even though, Paul Simon, his lyrics were amazing a lot of the time. And Brian Wilson maybe not always that strong on lyrics, but overall, producing and arranging and everything. Pete Townsend, of course, in The Who and his solo career. His solo career, I feel wasn't as strong as being in The Who. If it was just for The Who, it would be S tier, but I'll still put him in A. And I think he's one of those musical geniuses. You know what? I can't have him in A. He's got to go to S tier. I'm going to put him ahead of Joni Mitchell. Yoko Ono. I know some of you are pointing at me and laughing, mocking me, but I am a fan of a lot of her music, not all of it, but I would say at least 75% of it. The 25% experimental stuff I'm not a fan of. So overall, I'll put her in B ahead of Mickey Dolenz, because I think she's a great artist. Mike Love. He doesn't get much love, does he? But I think I really do like his vocals in the Beach Boys, and he wrote some great songs with Brian Wilson. I'm going to put him overall in B. I'll put him at the start of B because he was in the Beach Boys, and they wrote a lot of classics. Randy Newman, I love his early solo albums, not as much, later on. I didn't really follow his career, but his first half dozen albums, great songwriter. I'm going to put him in A. Ahead of Bruce Springsteen, just for me personally. Madonna, I'm not a fan of her music, but I hate to say it, she does have some talent. And I do like some of the songs. I'm going to put her in B, just to be fair, but not ahead of Yoko Ono, or Mickey Dolenz. So I'll put her ahead of Janis Joplin. Okay. David Bowie. He's S tier. Ahead of Ron Mayle. And ahead of Paul Simon. Just, thinking of the talent, not just songwriting, but overall. And, stage performance and everything. Phil Collins, of course, superb drummer, very underrated with Genesis. I wasn't crazy about his solo career, though, but still a great talent. He's got to be an A. Ahead of Randy Newman. No artist in C or D yet. Poor Kid Rock at the bottom. Maybe someone will join him. Rod Stewart. Now, I love the early years of Rod Stewart, and then, of course, even some of his more commercial hit songs I really did like. And then the faces and everything, very talented. I'm going to put him in A. Just ahead of Phil Collins. There. Johnny Cash. One of the greats. I'm going to put him in A. just before Elton John. Bono from U2. I was a huge fan of U2 for many, 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 many years, but I was, kind of turned off by them in the last 10 years or so. But still, love his vocals. And he did a lot of, wrote a lot of great songs. I'm going to put him, but the last few albums have been kind of weak, at least to me. I'll put him in A. Just ahead of Rod Stewart. All right, Elvis Presley. He's got to be S tier, even though, he wasn't a songwriter, but I've always said I consider him the greatest live performer, for one person on stage. So let's see where. He's got to go. He's got to go pretty close to the front here. Yeah. Sly Stone. Once again, the early years with Sly and the Family Stone, just so many great songs. And then he kind of petered out, I guess. But he's still a great talent. I'm going to put him in A. Just before Elton John. John Fogerty, Creedence Clearwater Revival, although I never really followed his solo career, but still. And he's still performing great, and sounding great today. He's got to be S tier. But whereabouts? Right there. Just before Lou Reed. Frank Zappa. He's S tier. Another musical genius. I would put him ahead of Pete Townsend. Right there. He's not beating Ron Mayle. Okay. David Gilmour. Never really followed too much of his solo career, but of course he's amazing. He was amazing in Pink Floyd. So I'll put him in A. Just before Elton John. That's pretty good company. Robert Plant. Now, his solo career, he's done so much since Led Zeppelin, unlike Jimmy Page. I'll put him in A. Just before Jimmy Page, because, Jimmy Page, the production on the Led Zeppelin albums, of course, the guitar playing and some of the songs he wrote. Jimi Hendrix, I know, would be S tier for a lot of you. And I have to agree. I can't have him ahead of Ron Mayle. I'm sorry. I can't. I'll put him just ahead of Chuck Berry. Taylor Swift, not really a fan, but she has talent. I'll put her in B. Ahead of Madonna for sure. Freddie Mercury, I know would be S tier for a lot of you. Um, and I would have to agree, but where? Certainly, you know, for stage performance, I think Elvis Presley is still the better of the two. Can't put him ahead of Ron Mael. There, just before Chuck Berry. 3 to go. Billy Joel. I used to buy Billy Joel albums back in the day, in the 70s and 80s. So he is talented. I'm not really a fan of his music these days, but he is a very talented for sure. So I got to put him in A. I have him. Let's see here. Ahead of Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, right there. Well, like I said, I'm just going by talent. I guess I'll put him ahead of Randy Newman. Yeah. Kate Bush. She's got to be S tier. Once again, a musical genius. I'll put her just before Lou Reed. There. One more to go. Roger Waters. David Gilmour's best buddy. Yeah, not a fan of his solo career at all, or a fan of him, actually, these days. But in Pink Floyd, those were the great years for him. But overall, I got to put him in B. Just ahead of Taylor Swift. Yeah, so that's just my own personal list. There's old Kid Rock all by himself at the bottom. And so, yeah, a lot of talented artists. I would love your thoughts on my tier list, which ones you agree with or which ones you really disagree with. Um, I'm sure if I did this tomorrow, some things would be a little different, but I'm very happy with Paul McCartney being at the front of the S tier, followed by John Lennon, Elvis Presley, and Brian Wilson, and David Bowie, and Paul Simon, and Ron Mael, and Frank Zappa. Thanks for watching, and looking forward to your thoughts. Blue. Bye.